Assalamu alaikum, merhaba. Welcome to the opening day of this conference, the Hizmet Movement, Responses to Contemporary Challenges. I am Professor Sophia Pandya, the chair of the Department of Religious Studies here at Cal State Long Beach. And I'm delighted to see all of you here for this important gathering. This is the first conference on the Hizmet movement since the coup attempt in Turkey in 2016. We in SoCal are privileged that this is taking place here at CSULB. Over 270 participants and presenters from at least 22 countries have come for this event. Our presenters are academics and activists from both inside and outside the Hizmet movement. It's an immense honor to have played a role in organizing this conference and in welcoming you here on our campus. Yet we must acknowledge that many of you are struggling with grief right now because of the recent devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Some of you have lost friends or family. Perhaps some of you have survivor's guilt. I think most of us feel pretty helpless right now when we think about the extent of the human suffering. It's also likely that this event has re-traumatized many of you from Turkey, who are just putting your lives back together after surviving a brutal purge at the hands of the Turkish government. Let us now show our respect and observe a moment of silence where we remember the victims and survivors of this catastrophe in which at least 40,000 people were killed. This number is unfortunately certain to rise. If you have not yet done so, please consider donating what you can to those whose lives have turned upside down on the bitterly cold morning of February 6th. I now call for a moment of silence. I'd like to turn now to the topic of our conference, the Hizmet Movement Responses to Contemporary Challenges. But first, I should offer a description of the Hizmet movement because we have students here today that are only hearing about this group for the very first time. The Hizmet movement is a civil society, charitable, and humanitarian organization which was inspired by Sufi Islam, and Sufism is the mystical dimension of Islam, as articulated by its founder, Mr. Fethullah Gülen, known by his supporters as Hoca Efendi. While some scholars and critics term this group the Gülen movement, this is not how the community prefers to be called. In today's society, we now recognize that we should allow individuals and communities to self-identify. Thus, it's no longer ethical or respectful to use that moniker. The word Hizmet means service in Turkish, and participants are encouraged to perform acts of service towards the betterment of humanity. I propose that whether you are an insider or an outsider to the movement, that during this conference we consistently use the more respectful term Hizmet to refer to this community. Hizmet has established thousands of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations in over 100 different countries. According to its own statements, it supports liberal democracy, individual human rights, and the rule of law. Before its fallout with the Turkish government, which began in 2013, the movement was a relatively uncontroversial organization in Turkey. However, in the past decade, the movement has been subject to acute oppression in Turkey. As early as 2015, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan formally designated it to be a terrorist organization, the Fethullahist Terrorist Organization, or FETÖ, despite his own 10-year collaborative relationship with it and the lack of a shred of evidence that any participant engaged in politically motivated violence. The relationship between Hizmet and Erdogan, while amicable from 2003 to 2013, began to deteriorate in 2013 and became one of outright enmity after the 2016 failed putsch. The worst of Erdogan's repressive actions against the movement began immediately after the attempted coup in Turkey in 2016, which he publicly blamed on the movement without awaiting evidence. After the coup attempt, Erdogan suspended the European Convention of Human Rights and began his purge of all of those that he considered to be his opposition. As of today, Erdogan's Justice and Development Party, the AKP, has arrested over 100,000 people, detained almost 500,000, and closed or took over around 190 media outlets in Turkey and shut down over 3,000 educational institutions. Over 150,000 teachers, academics, police, prosecutors, judges, and other public and civil servants were sacked. According to Amnesty International, those that lost their jobs have suffered professional annihilation, unable to work in public service at all. The government has since carried out a range of human rights violations against those even remotely associated with Hizmet. According to both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, those include torture, rape, beatings, and forced confessions. Subsequently, many left the country, fleeing wherever they were able to go, sometimes on flimsy, inflatable boats. Inside of Turkey, many are still hiding from the government or are in jail. Today, those Hizmet participants outside of Turkey live all over the world in diaspora and are still recovering from this communal trauma. When this conference was first imagined, the community was just beginning to regroup, to begin to construct a new beginning, a new future. This conference was meant to bring scholars and practitioners together towards an analysis of Hizmet's challenges, but also to consider opportunities and how to best rebuild, and move forward. Yet when the earthquake hit last week, we were all devastated. Many in the Hizmet community wished they could return to Turkey to assist family, friends, and their former countrymen and countrywomen. Yet they cannot, without the risk of being detained and arrested and maybe tortured. Many have spoken to me of being doubly traumatized, once by the purge and now by the earthquake. One person recently told me that she has been able to work it all this week. She just keeps crying about all of those still trapped in the rubble. As many of you know well, it wasn't the earthquake alone that killed so many people. It was the lack of government oversight of construction in Turkey. It was the blind eye to rampant corruption in Turkey. It was the greed of the contractors and building owners, some of who knew well that the buildings that just crumbled were not built to code. Thus, many of you are also very, very angry about what perhaps were needless deaths. We have an opportunity today, however. Instead of feeling angry, guilty, helpless, or full of grief, let's listen to our presenters discuss challenges and opportunities. Let's engage in roundtable discussions about ways to respond, to help, and to move forward. Let's remember that through communal action towards earthquake relief or taking part in other forms of humanitarian service, we honor those that cannot be here. Remembering Mevlana Rumi's words, through love, all pain will turn to medicine, shows us that showing love through our positive actions can also be a balm or a cure for our own souls. Thank you very much.